So carrying on our conversation, we flew by that first 10-minute section, and we'll have to bring you back for more because clearly there's so much here that hasn't come out into the public domain yet. But can we try and look ahead in this section to your next term? And you've already announced here that you are standing. I think that's not new news anyway, but you're very committed. But at the minute now, you're outside the tent and you're causing issues. Let's put it that way. Is this some sort of bitterness, revenge, retaliation, because now you're free to talk?
No. It's about getting the best public policy for the Isle of Man. We are at a very difficult time. The challenges our community faces are absolutely they're huge. We've got massive issues, and they need to be tackled properly. There are 3 issues that are immediate over the next month or so, which are focused on in the summer. One of those is planning, the old issue from May, and we've got the area plan for the East coming up. I've worked with excellent officers in planning, to put on the table a better approach to planning, but we've pulled back from that better approach to planning as was seen in my sacking. And also many other parts of government have let the planners down with the area plan for the East. So the debate in October is going to be really rich, and I hope that the decision is at best put off, and even better put off for quite some time. Because, for instance, the housing policy, I got in June, I moved successfully that we would have a report to Tynwald in October dealing with the major issues in housing that we've got. That's not on the order paper in October. Housing is right behind the area plan for the East, so how can we go ahead and approve the area plan for the East when we're missing the housing report that was promised in June for delivery in October? Likewise with employment land, where you live, where I live, we look around, we see lots of offices that used to be occupied and are no longer occupied. We see vacant properties and we're not sure what the history behind those vacant properties is. We see brownfield sites and we're not sure where government policy is on those and what actually government is doing about them. And so we need to address all of that before we get to the area plan for these. So that's one major priority. Shall I give you the other 2, or do you want to come in?
No, honestly, please, there's nothing I need to say at this thing. What are the other 2? Because I'm done here.
The other one is gas regulation. So I can declare now, because the order paper will be published by the time that you put this out, unless there's an administrative hitch, there isn't actually a gas regulatory agreement on the table for October. There is a statement. There is a statement from the Minister for Policy and Reform about the future of Manx gas regulation, and this is a pledge to the Minister, to Laurie Hooper, that I want to be on the inside, making sure that we use the next 2 months as well as we possibly can to put in place the right gas regulation so that we get fair pricing for all Manx gas customers as well as electricity customers, so we get the right future for space heating and all the other things.
And this was what you were dealing with, by the way, wasn't it, when you were in Cabinet?
Yeah. And we need to have in place, beyond that, we need to have in place the right system of economic regulation for not only gas but also for electricity, for car parks, for public transport, including bus
We'll talk more
finance.
about gas, I think, in a separate interview here.
Okay, and then the third one was housing. I want to compliment the Cabinet Office and others over the summer, because although they haven't actually delivered the report, they have continued the work we'd already started, and they have actually just announced an emergency housing shelter and a housing first approach, which is the root cause of beginning to tackle housing and thus poverty, because to deal with poverty you've got to tackle the root causes of it. And if you put a roof over somebody's head, it becomes easier for them to hold down a job and to earn a decent income for them and their families.
If it's still been in the Council of Ministers, would all this have just been out of the public eye, by the way? Would you have been dealing with this there and then under the radar sort of thing, and now you're having to lob your bricks slightly here?
There is that, and that's what's probably fundamentally wrong with the Manx political system, because far too much goes on behind closed doors in the Council of Ministers, and that's the natural political way of some of the ministers that I was working with. They prefer to keep things to themselves, to keep information to themselves, to be vague about where the policy is leading to them. I'm much more transparent and open, and I hope the public respects me for that, because I never breached collective responsibility.
You went to the wire.
I went close to it because I believe passionately in putting on the table the options. So there are certain issues that we're really not talking about in the Council of Ministers, or in Tynwald are, but the Council of Ministers doesn't. So what are we going to do with our ageing population? What are the real things to do with how we provide health and charge for health, how we provide care not being talked about enough. Mrs. Beecroft began to talk about it, and she became history because she was beginning to talk about it. In terms of climate change, it's all well and good making a declaration of an emergency, but what matters is how people change their mode of transport, how people change the way that they heat their houses. There's massive cost to these, there's massive disruption to people's lives, and we should be talking about those real issues.
Where do you see yourself, as you said you're standing, if you get in, where do you see yourself fitting best next time around? Obviously, a ministerial job you want.
Yeah.
Is your eye on the prize to be the Chief Minister?
I'm a team player, and I believe that the Chief Minister role is no longer seen by the previous incumbents as being first amongst equals. The Chief Minister believes that you get elected and then you choose, you hire and fire. There's got to be an element of that, but the most important thing for me at the moment is laying out the policy options that the Manx public's got to choose between, with the facts, with the analysis that I hope's helpful. We have a really well-informed election in September 2021 about the real issues. We have a real mandate, and then somehow the 24 MHKs, it's clear to the public what they support in, and that the government doesn't surprise them in terms of some of its policies.
Would you stand as Chief Minister if you had a chance?
As I indicated in 2016 on the doorsteps, what we needed in 2016 to 2021 was we needed a team of 5 or 6 people who were controlling the council ministers with all of the House of Keys, at least as many of them as possible behind them. I thought we had that. That's why I joined in. It turned out after 2 or 3 years that we didn't really have that. We actually had the pretense that we had that, and there was really no agreement on certain issues.
Is it dictatorial?
To an extent, there are tendencies that way. But the most important thing is we genuinely didn't have agreement on some of the most important issues in 2016 when the programme for government was formed. The programme for government itself could have been a much clearer document, and the reason it's not clear primarily is because there wasn't agreement. So how can you express agreement and a clearer objective and a clear action plan if you don't actually have agreement about what you're trying to do?
You're throwing up so many things here, which is it's incredible to hear it. Do you feel relieved that you're outside this tent now, then, that you can do this?
Do I look relieved?
I'm not. Do you feel relieved?
I tell you, there's two aspects to it. There's 2 aspects to it, Paul. The first one is I can now say what I want, do what I want, and God forbid, I can actually think what I want. That's one thing.
Hang on. So you weren't allowed to think what you wanted in the sense because it was collective responsibility. So whatever you said inside the meetings, as soon as you got out, you had to give the party line or whatever you want to call it.
It's not just me. I mean, through the last 3 decades, there's been issues along these lines. And I go back, call in Dominic Delaney, ask him. Ask him about his episodes. His family's kindly sponsored me and nominated me in elections in recent times, and it's a perennial issue. Okay. But the second point is, I did lose lots of weight in the council ministers, but I put on a few kilos.
You had tons of jobs, didn't you? I mean, everything seemed to be you were always to be nominated to be on this, that, and other. But in our last few minutes here, how do you think you did out of 10? Do you want to give me a score on how your performance has been last year?
I hope the Manx public's happy with my performance. I haven't been quite as diligent knocking on people's doors every week as some MHKs have done in the past in my constituency, but I like to think that I've replied to emails and phoned and visited when necessary. In terms of policy development, I like to think that I've worked cooperatively with others.
And you get on with Anne Quayle your
very much so. Anne's doing a great job on thinking about transport and streets and so on, and I'm right behind her on that. I support her in all of that.
She does a lot of interviews. I'm still trying to get her to come here, so if you're watching Anne...
But look, I just want to give you one thought, to be a leader traditionally in politics, you've got to act Churchillian. You've got to be a bit bombastic, a bit dictatorial, as you called it. That's what
it's got Howard Quayle's name on here. So Churchillian is what we keep hearing.
And there are quite a few Churchillian people who fancy themselves as minor Churchills surrounding, Howard Quayle. But there's another type of leadership. Goodness. There's a type of leadership which involves knowing when it's best not to be a leadership in that sense, to be a team player.
Out of 10, what are you going to give yourself?
8 or 9.
And I won't die for this one. The final question: how do you think that Quayle administration's doing?
5 or 6.
Oh, okay, that's pretty low. But I was
it started off really, really well, and we've made some massive structural change. Chris Robertshaw has talked in public this last week about one public service, smart service framework, evidence-based policy making. There's all sorts of things that I've managed to change in terms of HR, digital politics, social care that I'm very proud of. We'll talk about those much more in the coming year, I hope, yes. Paul. It could have 8 or 9, but the reality is it lost it slightly in the last year.